Greetings, Matthew.
Hey,
Apologies for not publishing the agenda earlier. That's on me.
no worries.
Hello, Kareem. Hey, Melt. Good to see you.
Hi everyone, nice to see you, Justin.
Give folks till 3 after to start filing in. Hello, Gary. I hope those of you in the Northern Hemisphere are finding ways to stay warm. It is, I think, 9 degrees Fahrenheit here in Philadelphia. So well below 0 C.
We're a little above 0 C here on the West Coast, Northwest, but chilly.
I have got my tea kettle running nonstop.
Hello. It looks like when I joined, I automatically grabbed host. Who's normally the host? I can reassign host to.
I don't think that'll matter, David. Thank you for joining.
How are y'all?
We're doing well. We're just getting ready to get started. We like to wait till 3 after for people to trickle in.
Sounds good.
I neglected to post the agenda, so I just dashed something off real quick in Discord. We're definitely going to be talking about repo moves, DCO, and the charter.
Great.
So thank you for joining us to
Of
handle
course. Yeah.
those questions.
I think one thing that might matter is the hosts will, whenever we start recording, I think that will go probably to their cloud, assuming we're recording to the cloud.
We are already recording, so yes, that is
Yeah.
going to...
I saw a record button on my screen, so I thought we were not.
Oh, interesting.
It looks like it's recording, but
Yep,
and,
it is.
and if there's space on the agenda, I had another topic somewhat related to these meetings. We did recently move calls over to the new LFT calendar. So this is the old Zoom link. There may be people who join the other one because we now on the LFT calendar are promoting a different link. So anyway, this speaks to like the topic I wanted. I would love to have like a point of contact on one of the Besu maintainers that the staff could reach out to about these sort of logistic type things. I know after Matt Nelson left, our point of contact, we don't really have a clear one now. So if there's space on the agenda, I wanted to put that in there.
Sure, sure. That's a quick one. I think the answer is me.
Okay, great.
Cool. So welcome everybody. This is the basic contributor call. We are likely to, excuse me. We are under an antitrust notice, which is available in our wiki. Please be advised the meeting is being recorded. We ask for folks to stay on mute unless they're speaking. And if you have a question and need to get into the conversation, feel free to use the raise hand feature. So welcome everybody. This is our first meeting of the year. Welcome new faces. If anybody wants to introduce themselves that isn't normally on this, now's your chance.
So I can introduce myself. So I'm Nelson. So I will start sharing the course just to get an idea of how things are moving. Yeah, I'm working on some, but that is a short-term knowledge job. So I will be more like listening what things are being done. Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you, Meltsun. Folks may have seen Meltsun around the various Discords, and he's working on a portal client. Very, very interesting stuff. We're hoping to get that deeper integrated and leveraged from Besu in the near future. So awesome. Welcome.
Great. And I can introduce myself real quick. My name is David. If I haven't met you before, it's nice to meet you. I'm one of the staff members at LFDT, and I'm here to support. I don't normally come to these calls, but I'm happy to. If it's helpful for me to be here, I can. But if there's ever anything you have questions about or have needs for in terms of infrastructure or promotion or whatever it is, training, whatever it may be that the staff can help you with, feel free to reach out to me. On Discord. You can reach me on email too.
Cool. Thank you, David. Okay, so let's get into it. General announcements. We have a couple of migrations ongoing that are worth noting. We did move the Besu error-prone checks from the Hyperledger GitHub organization to the Besu ETH organization. That seemed to go fairly smoothly. We have yet to cut a release and depend on the output from Besu. That would be next steps. We also should probably nominate next repositories to do. I would think maybe Besu Docs, Besu Homebrew, Besu Native. These are all potential targets to migrate next. Does anybody have any strong opinions on the matter?
I think docs and homebrew are low risk, but maybe also low value in terms of like signal. If we move Besu native first, we might, if there's any likelihood of there being problems on generating artifacts and builds and things like that, we'd probably see it Besu native rather than a downstream repo.
I don't know of any ongoing work right now in Besu native. Does anybody else?
I think Verkle IPA stuff for Constantine is going to be going on, but I don't see any releases in the near future. We could cut a release of Besu native with an uprev inversion, and then make sure that we depend on it in Besu for the subsequent release. I think that'd be a good just signal to get that things are working correctly.
Okay. Sorted. All right, then I will document that as an action item, and I will communicate that to Rye and let him know that he can keep the migration train moving forward. Speaking of migrations, migrating off of the wiki, i.e. Confluence. Not much motion on this, frankly. I think for things like issue agendas, like right now, I don't have permission to create new agendas, but maybe that's okay because maybe we should be using GitHub issues in the governance repo that we now have in the ETH Besu, a la the rest of Ethereum. I think that's probably a reasonable place to stick agendas for meetings as well as posting notes. Does anybody have thoughts on that?
I can give a quick infrastructure update. We are in the process of spinning up an LFDT wiki, although I'm not sure if projects necessarily interested in that. It seems like so much of the project content in general is moving to GitHub. Our kind of assumption is even on a new LFDT wiki, projects may prefer to just go ahead and use their GitHub repos. But if there's interest in using a wiki, I can give you updates on where we are in the LFDT wiki process.
Yeah. There is interest in using the wiki. We have a decent amount of freeform documentation that might not really fit into a GitHub repository. And we get a lot of value out of design docs, how-to docs, developer documentation, all that kind of stuff is in the wiki right now. So yeah, I would love to hear more about that.
Okay. I don't want to take up the agenda right now. I mean, we could talk about that separately, but just the quick version is we are going to move off of Confluence. We are looking at spinning up a new LFDT wiki using GitHub, their wiki feature, which is, very similar to Confluence, not exactly the same, but similar. So that's the short version. But there would be wiki space if you're interested.
Okay. Cool.
And maybe that's something I can reach out to you, Justin, about just give you an update on infrastructure conversations in general we were having with Matt, and just maybe that's something you and I could talk about offline.
Yeah, that'd be great. Okay. All right, so we talked about all right, agenda items. So we covered the repo move. We got some feedback from the TSA, the technical steering entity, with regard to our feedback on DCO. The TLDR is that DCOs need to stay. The CLA is not a substitute for the DCO. It's actually intended to be used for something slightly different. That means something that DCO can't quite capture. So the DCO actions are going to have to stay in our CI/CD, and folks will have to continue amending them to all of their commit messages.
Yeah, I did reach internally to try to get clarity on this so I could have some information to share on the call. But I mean, what you just said is my understanding as well. I mean, and I'll caveat by saying I'm not a lawyer, so, I'm just passing on what I've heard from lawyers. But yeah, they are separate. They have similar but different functions, and they can complement each other. A project, if there may be reasons, could do both. There are reasons why, and you see some projects do DCO plus CLA. So I think it really comes down to what are you trying to solve? I was curious to learn more. Was your thoughts around DCO just that it was kind of a hassle and a roadblock, or was it
Yep.
a conversation that maybe this doesn't give us enough protection?
Nope, nope, nothing really political. It's really just kind of a hassle. If you look through our commit history, you will undoubtedly find a lot of messages that read simply "fixing DCO." DCO broke.
Yeah.
So this is just a thing that people have to deal with. It reduces our output. It's a little bit of friction for our CI/CD pipeline, and it's hard for us to appreciate the value that it offers because we're
Yeah.
developers. We're not the actual legal entity that's being protected by it. So
Yeah. No, agreed and understand. But ultimately, all the users, I mean, again, not a lawyer, what I've heard is that for people using the code, it definitely reduces friction on their end because there are certainly organizations and enterprises that wouldn't use code if the kind of intellectual property, rights weren't clear. So I think there are kind of benefits on that end of things. And it would be friction for the developers. There have been cases, you're probably familiar, Linux itself, for example, got into a lawsuit when the IP rights on some of those commits weren't clear, and then everybody got sued, and that was clearly friction for that community. So there are certainly reasons for it. Maybe we haven't done a good enough job on our end explaining those reasons, but there certainly are reasons. And then I would say on the friction side, I think that's something we could still look at. If it would be helpful for you to see what we could do to minimize friction, that is something that we could work with the Technical Advisory Council with, because I know other projects have said the same thing. Do you think that would be useful, that if maybe there was some sort of task force that we could put in place to try to minimize friction for the projects around DCO, not necessarily move off of it, but make it easier?
yeah, I think so. I think for sure. I think one of the questions that we have is like, well, why are signed like cryptographically signed commits insufficient? Why is a DCO preferable to that? That might be
Yeah.
a talking point that would help us understand it a little bit better.
Yeah. Matt, I mean, I don't know, what's your thought? I mean, I would love to see, and the staff is happy to support, but if the TAC wanted to have some sort of a DCO task force, maybe we could put a better explanation in place. Maybe that task force could create a better explanation, give some context, give some understanding, and look at where maybe pain points could be minimized. Is that something, do you think TAC members would be interested in addressing this year?
Yeah, so I was on the discussion, I think it was it earlier this week or late last week? Yeah, Thursday last week, around this. I think obviously understanding the legal requirement is the most important thing. The uh I guess it would be really useful for the TAC to understand exactly what the friction is in, like, really clearly. I mean, are we talking just literally adding the minus S onto commits is the main kind of hassle that is a pain, or is it that when you're working on different projects, you need to sign off some of them, you don't need to sign off others, and that you need to be careful of what you're signing off for different projects. So I think the TAC would be really benefit from knowing exactly what the friction is, so they can kind of understand what the what the motivation would be for dropping DCOs in favor of CLAs.
Okay.
Yeah, but I think that's a good point, Matt. If the TAC had a clear list of friction points from not just Besu, because again, I've heard it from other projects too, maybe we could then, that would give the TAC something concrete to go, address. Maybe there's a number of those friction points that could be removed while still keeping DCO.
Yeah, I definitely, the one thing I took away from the TAC meeting last week was that the two are not kind of, swap one out, drop the other one in, and you're good to go. That they serve slightly different purposes. So I do think ultimately it's going to come down probably to a legal assessment of the requirement around them. I know not many people on the TAC kind of have that expertise enough to know absolutely for sure what is suitable, what's acceptable from that point of view. And that might be the challenge of just making sure that if DCOs were dropped in favor of something else, that would still provide all the necessary kind of legal protections.
Yeah, I think definitely, and that's something where the staff can help. I think we definitely need to do a better job of explaining the why of it. Like, why is it useful, and what are the risks if you don't have it? And I can look at that. But I think there are some mechanical things that we could probably also do to reduce some of the pain points.
Sounds good. Okay, so the charter. Folks may have seen a PR into Besu recently. Let me see if I can actually find it here, and I'll post a link. Here we go. It's PR number 8114. This was a charter that had been denied for inclusion in the, well, I shouldn't say that. A charter, I don't know that it's actually the same as this one, had been proposed by Matt Nelson before he left for inclusion in Besu, and it was rejected. Now, the new one, here's the link there, PR for folks, has been looked at by a couple of people. Comments have been added. And I think what we'd like to do is we'd like to really encourage people to participate strongly in this PR and provide their feedback, opinions on how we can get this issue sorted out. So I guess for starters, one of the recurring questions that we have on the charter is, what does this mean, and why is it specific to Besu as a sub-project of LDTF?
Yeah. And again, this is maybe an area where we could have communicated more clearly on the staff side, and apologies about that. I mean, so for a little bit of context, we had been coordinating with Matt Nelson about a number of things, and I have heard in some cases that maybe what we had coordinated with him about didn't necessarily get communicated that widely, kind of with the community. So that's on us that we weren't, reaching the right channels. For example, with the Besu name change, dropping Hyperledger, we heard from some people in the community that they hadn't heard. That was news to them when that change happened. So it seems like there's some communication issues. So maybe, Justin, again, that's something you and I can talk about offline, about what are better ways that we could communicate going forward on things. But just for some context, previously Hyperledger had a charter for the entire community, but not for projects. That was just how things were set up. Hyperledger has been around for almost 10 years now. That's how it was set up originally. What we've heard from other parts of the Linux Foundation, that it's really best practice to have charters at the project level, not at the community level. So when we moved to LFDT last year, so just for context, last year, the Hyperledger Foundation became Linux Foundation Decentralized Trust. The whole organization changed. The charter at the organization level changed, and a lot of that stuff got pushed down to project level. And that makes sense. I mean, the intuitive idea being, if somebody is coming to evaluate a given open source project, let's give them that governance information where they're looking, right? So in the past, you would come to a project hosted by Hyperledger and there wouldn't be any governance. So people would, there was a lot of confusion, like, how is this project governed? What are the rules? And there was kind of living somewhere else, right? It was living at that Hyperledger Foundation level. So really it's just pushing the charter that had existed all along, but just making it much more clear, putting it in projects. So it's not, Besu is not the only, every single Hyperledger, every single project that had been hosted by Hyperledger was going through the same process. So Fabric, Firefly, etc. All last year, we did the same process of giving them all charters. And I think the other nice thing about being at the project level is it gives the projects the chance to tweak things, right? So when everybody was kind of governed under the umbrella of the Hyperledger charter, that was one charter that really applied to everybody. But what we've seen last year when we had conversations with project maintainers about giving them their own charter, some projects wanted to tweak things and they had the ability to do so. So that's the other nice thing. There's more flexibility when the governance is at the project level because each project can have a chance to evaluate things and what works best for them, right? So the Fabric charter is slightly different because they made some changes. The Fabric charter, for example, is slightly different from other people's charters, and other projects made changes too. So that's kind of the background and context. It's not unique to Besu. It's really a best practice across the LF. I think the benefits are, again, if somebody comes to a project and is considering using it, it really is one of those markers of, hey, this is a well-run project, to see that governance there at the project level, right? The same with the DCO. If I came to a project and there was no charter and there was no sign off or anything on when people make commits, I might have questions about how viable that project is, right?
Interesting. So as we're looking at this PR and maybe proposing changes, deletions, etc., are we to understand that there is a larger parent charter that our project charter is considered to be extending?
Yeah, let me get that link for you. Yes, yes.
And in which case, like, how much do we have to police how much our charter would be overriding anything from the parent charter? I would assume it couldn't.
Well, there's not really any override. It's really just the project specific. And here, by the way, I'm going to drop a link. And I can share my screen too.
And I know I'm kind of applying engineer's disease to a legal problem here, but
And what we could do is we could compare and contrast. I mean, I could dig up the old Hyperledger Foundation charter. It's really, again, not a lawyer, but my view on this is the old Hyperledger Foundation charter had a lot of project specific stuff in it that we just bumped down to the project level. So this is the LF Decentralized Trust charter is shorter because a lot of the stuff like how the projects govern themselves are now in each individual project's charters, right? So there is, you can see there's this, I'm kind of scrolling through quickly, but you could see that the stuff in this LFDT charter is really stuff that applies to the organization and kind of that bigger entity and not project specific stuff. Like the LFDT has a governing board, right? Just like all nonprofits, there's a governing board, right? But that's not a project level thing, right? And then there's the technical advisory council. That's not really a project thing. That's the general governing body of the whole community, right? So you can see if you kind of just scroll through here, there's not any project specific stuff here. So they're not really in conflict. They're really complementary. If that answers your question.
A little bit. Yeah, thank you.
And again, if it's not clear, again, we had ongoing communications with Matt. We kind of walked him through it. Maybe we were on our end making some assumptions that he was passing that information along. Maybe that did or did not happen. But again, apologies for any lack of communication on our part last year on this.
Okay, no problem. So one of the other bullet points here, I'm just looking through the PR itself. The pull request 8114. Around line 27, there is a comment stating that the definition of maintainers and the process around maintainers is already defined in our maintainers.markdown file. When we run into situations like that, that seems like an easy thing for us to edit and update and say, please see the following, addendum, I guess, to this charter, and link it to the maintainers.markdown file. Would that be an acceptable compromise?
I'm not the one, again, if you want to make a change to the charter, I can help kind of communicate that. I mean, I think the short answer is yes, but I'm not the one who signs off on that. We have a legal team who handles charters. So if you want to make an edit, we can just run that by them. But other projects have certainly made changes to where they kind of list out their maintainers, for example. So, I mean, I've seen changes similar to what you're talking about go through.
Okay.
So I
Maybe
think the
that's a thing that
process,
we need. Yeah, maybe that's a thing that we need to facilitate, right? So like, if this is not a binary, like yes or no, adopt the charter or don't, we don't know how to make those types of addendums that you're saying Fabric does, and what our options are.
yeah.
And I think that's kind of some of the concern that I don't want to overly speak for other folks, and I will open the floor for other concerns. But it does seem like, hey, here's a charter, it just showed up, and it's kind of like, take it or leave it. And we're
Yeah.
not quite sure how our input is to help shape it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Again, and I think that's something I would love to fix in general going forward about how do we have clearer communication between the Besu maintainers and the rest of the community. And because there'll be things that we want to support you with, and there's things that we, want to reach out about, and we want to make sure that that's coming across. But again, it sounds like the communication around this last year was not ideal, but it's absolutely not a binary. We did not just drop charters on other projects. We only rolled out the charters when we had a sign off. We clearly something broke down this time, but my understanding last year was there had been a conversation in the community, there had been a sign off, there had been kind of a discussion, but again, maybe that didn't happen.
How much sign off actually was there? We actually lost a core contributor over the change, over the charter, and over the language. And one
Oh,
other thing I'd like to point out is what's troubling is that we're enshrining agreements. I don't know how much of a contract or whatever this really is, but if it's something that is mutable only within the rules of the repository, then it only takes one contributor and one other person to sign off to make changes to these things within the repository. So I don't know how binding these things really are or should be. But yeah, it definitely feels like we should have a little bit more conversation and control around these things other than kind of isolated commits and changes to these things.
yeah. Well, a couple of thoughts. One, I'm very sorry to hear about losing the core contributor. If there's anything I can do to help reach out to that person and kind of explain what happened and maybe, apologize and take the blame for it on the staff side, happy to do that. I mean, that's horrible to hear that happened. I don't know if that's possible or not, but I'm happy to help, try to reach out if we want to do that. And again, in terms of process, the intended process was to give, and this worked what we did in general, to give projects a draft based on what we've seen work well on other projects. So the language originated from our project formation team on the Linux Foundation, which sets up hundreds of different open source projects. And over the years, they've kind of seen what's worked well. And so the intent was to give projects a draft versus like a blank sheet of paper, right? Like, hey, give you something that we've seen work well for other projects as a starting point. If you want to go through and change things, you're welcome to. And there was kind of a back and forth. And in this case, there was a back and forth. We did get some feedback, ran it by our project formation team, and they gave us we iterated and changed things, and we can go through that process again. But that was the intended process. Like, if people had questions about things or wanted to change things, have that dialogue. And again, we can do that process now. So if people do have questions, places they see that they want to, edit or update, let us know, and we can walk through that. And again, I think maybe auditing where the staff is communicating is helpful. I know, for example, the Besu mailing list doesn't necessarily get a lot of, attention. And if we post stuff there, maybe that's not going to be very helpful. We do also post in the Discord channels, but again, there's a lot of Discord channels. So maybe stuff we post doesn't always get noticed or is not in the right spot. So I think maybe we can do a couple things in parallel. We can tackle the charter review and revisions itself, and then maybe in parallel also just have a more general discussion on, how communication goes, because what the staff does is we typically have a point of contact with the maintainers for each project. You know, there's a bunch of projects, hundreds of maintainers, you know, what has worked well in other cases, and this is why I suggested we put this as an agenda item on here, is like having one clear point of contact for a project. So, you know, for Firefly, for example, we know to reach out to Enrique, and then Enrique is our point of contact. And if there's anything that needs to get talked about, you know, he's kind of our interface, and then he'll go talk about things with the Firefly maintainers. So I think that's a model that's worked well. So if we want to do that, we can set up that kind of process.
I
We can
think,
have,
yeah, I think that would be fine. I think maybe what we should do is, hit the rewind button a little bit, see if we can recirculate anything that was already recirculated, right? So if those conversations were happening on the mailing list, I'm happy to go search for them and dig them up. I am not super attentive to the mailing list itself. I don't get a lot of traffic off of it, so I'm happy to go look at that. If we can kind of maybe do a little bit of a rewind and kind of forensically put together, well, here's where we were.
yeah.
Gather all that information. That way we can get on the same page and then have a more concise discussion moving forward on changes that need to be made to the charter. I think that would be a good first step.
Yeah, let's definitely do that. I'm not, my understanding was the conversation mostly happened in the call. And again, this may not be accurate, but my understanding from what I'd heard last year is most of the conversations around the charter and other things like dropping the hyperledger from the Besu name happened in these calls and on Discord. Again, that might not be accurate, but that was my understanding about where the conversation.
I think that's probably true. I definitely remember conversations about dropping the hyperledger, but the charter was a little bit. I don't think the same thing can be said for the charter.
Okay. Well, it's helpful to know. Again, we have like 16 whatever projects. Staff can't go to all the project calls, so you know our visibility on if these discussions were happening or not. We were kind of taking Matt's word on some of this stuff, but yeah, I'm happy to join these calls more often if that's helpful too.
Okay. As far as specifics on the charter itself, I think maybe one thing that we could discuss right now is the notion of a series manager. There's a question in here around line 51 of the charter. It says approving and implementing policies and processes for contributing, i.e. the stuff that we have in our contributors file. So a good example of something that would be covered by this is our recent policy that we introduced on small, trivial, probably AI generated contributions that we don't necessarily get a lot of value at, and we don't really want to facilitate airdrop farmers that are working on this type of thing. According to this, it says that this is going to be governed by needs to be coordinated rather with the series manager of the project. Could you tell us what that is and who we should have run that policy by before we adopted it recently?
Yeah. Again, I'm probably not the best. I can help facilitate the conversations, but the best people to answer questions about the charter are the people on the Linux Foundation staff who kind of draft and maintain charters. So what we've done in other places, we can use GitHub if you want, where the PR is, or what we've done in other places is we've set up the text in a Google Doc, and then people have left comments like that, and then the Scott is probably the right person on the project formation team. Will go through and address those, and I can kind of facilitate and make sure that he's responding to everybody. So that's worked well on other projects. Again, we don't necessarily have to use Google Docs, but that could be a way to do it. You could put the text in there, mark that up with all the questions and comments you have or suggestions for revisions, and then we can go back and forth with Scott on that until it gets to the point where your questions are answered and you're happy with the language. And I can probably I can dig up the doc. Like I said, I can find that old Google Doc that we used. Let me do that and I'll send it to you, Justin. And we can either use that or do a new one or keep it on GitHub, or we're flexible.
Okay. All right. Well, Those are the general announcements. I don't have a roadmap review prepared for this particular meeting, but we probably will soon. I have been thinking about roadmap stuff. I guess I'm kind of the new Matt Nelson. I don't quite have anything to publish, but if I do, it'll be in the Discord and on the wiki. Matt Whitehead has been really good about keeping the enterprise roadmap wiki page updated, and I'm planning on doing the same thing shortly. So no news on that side. Matt, do you have anything you wanted to talk about from a road mapping perspective?
Nothing nothing immediately, Justin. I did a bit of a refresh before Christmas, kind of early December sometime. I can't remember if there was a contributor call where I talked through any of it. But Sally prompted me a couple of days ago just to take a look and see if it was up to date. I think what's in there is pretty kind of accurate. It talks
Awesome.
about the archive work, some QBFT work, possibly some load testing work that we'd like to spend some time doing. But generally, all those areas are kind of in progress at the moment, and that kind of continuing at the whatever pace we're able to kind of deliver them. On the roadmap are a few kind of maybe remove deprecate flags from things that we're happy have been in for a while now. Those are kind of small things to deliver. We just need to get around to doing them. So yeah, no, I think anyone who wants to look at the enterprise roadmap, it's pretty much up to date. Those kind of areas that I talked about are where we're spending our time. And yeah, that's about it, I think, Justin.
Awesome. Thank you, Matt. Okay, as far as releases are concerned, we did have a release that we cut last week that has been burning in over the weekend. So far, so good. Probably gonna actually put it out, I guess, tomorrow, maybe. So more on that will be communicated as always through the releases channel and Discord. Nothing too notable. You know, we're going to try and keep up our monthly release cadence moving forward in 2025. We'll always cut a hotfix if it's necessary for emergency reasons. No major policy or procedure changes on that front.
Maybe worth mentioning, Justin. Yeah, we plan to kind of probably take that release that's coming and start our own enterprise testing against it, the performance tests we use and things. We were going to take something from December, but there was a RocksDB config default change that we'd rather have the behavior where if you've already got a RocksDB database, it keeps the old config, which I think the new release will have. So we're just kind of holding out for that new release, and then we'll start exercising that one.
Okay. Okay, great. Their tag has already been pushed for that. It's a 2510 RC1 tag, so you can grab that and do whatever you need to it on your own schedule. And I'm happy to wait till I hear feedback from you before pushing the release.
Yeah, I would suggest typically we tend to work the other way around where we wait for the burn-in to go successfully and it to be released into open source land, and then we do our testing. Only in that our testing is probably going to take us a month.
Okay.
And is somewhat gated by our own other schedules. So I wouldn't want to hold out open source releases on our kind of more custom testing.
I see. Well, we can run that soak test
Yeah, that would
just
be
to
great.
make sure that that's happy before we push it.
Yeah, on that, I know there was an action to run that per release or whenever we're burning in. I wonder if there was an update on running that maybe automatically as a get action as well.
No updates on the automation for that.
Cool.
It's just a work bandwidth issue. I mean, there's
Yeah,
no
yeah, of
problem
course.
doing it.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Thanks.
Okay. Well, my friends, the floor is yours. Does anybody have anything they want to talk about?
Yeah, I would say one thing, and then let me grab a link. So just to reintroduce myself real quickly, you know, as a Linux Foundation staff member, we're here to support all the different projects that we host, and we want to make sure that, you know, we can do everything we can to help you be successful. So let me just give you one link, just something to consider. There's a number of different things we can help. All these things are optional, but there's a number of different ways that we can help projects. We put these together in this presentation. If it's helpful at some future call, we could go through this, or you could just look through this and let me know if you have questions. But there's a lot of stuff at your disposal that you may be interested in doing this year with us. And if we can help you with that, happy to do that. So for example, and I know some of you are already familiar with it because we did some of this stuff last year. We did an online workshop last year. If you ever want to help, you know, kind of let people know what they can do with Besu and how to do it, we can help you organize a workshop. But there's a bunch of other stuff we can help you with, kind of captured in that presentation. So again, just to let you know what you have available to you.
Cool. All right, we'll take a look at this and we'll look for opportunities to, you know, farm some of this work out to you. I mean,
Great,
I
but
think, yeah, like we could use help on, you know, marketing and things like that. You know, we have, yeah, there's definitely needs there that
For sure.
Foundation helps with.
For sure. I mean, just to give you one example, Besu is very big in Portugal and Brazil, and we do a lot of stuff in Portuguese with local community members there. And, you know, that's definitely a way, you know, we want to help try to connect people who are interested in the projects, you know, with the projects themselves to figure out, you know, how do we bring these two people together. So again, maybe that's something we could talk about in the future about what we could do this year to help you out. But just wanted to throw that out there.
Okay. Thank you, David. Does anybody have anything else they want to discuss while the floor is open? All right. We'll let that marinate for a minute or two, but if nobody has anything, I am done and would love to give folks 15 minutes back. Cool. All right then.
Thanks all.
Thanks, everybody.
Great. Thanks all.
Thanks, everyone.